Anderson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass Allen over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, deep ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, Los Angeles? 1090 ESPN Radio. It's a Friday afternoon. Will Decker in the house with the madman to my left. This is, was supposed to be a very fun Bruin Bible. We unfortunately got some news about Jay Toia entering the transfer portal. In my opinion, one of the most indispensable players we've got at UCLA. And Jamal and I are going to dive into this all in just a second. We're going to get some advertisements out of the way for the Bruin Bible and ESPN Radio 1090 and talk about this Toia transfer portal situation that's got UCLA fans reeling. First sponsorship we got is Bell to Bell Fitness, the best place to learn boxing on the west side of Los Angeles. This is a facility, an area run by Tony Gonzalez, who is one of the best boxing minds we have on the west side of Los Angeles, was a former UCLA boxing coach for over a decade. Learn boxing from a Bruin. Tony Gonzalez is your guy. His fight-inspired training is going to make you a better athlete and get you into better shape. Check it out, Tony Gonzalez, Bell to Bell Fitness. And for those thinking about moving out to Arizona, how about looking into our guy named Jay Toia? Jay Toia is a licensed real estate agent in Arizona, a lifelong Bruin. He's a current Wooden Athletic Fund donor and football season ticket holder. When not selling houses or going to UCLA games, he loves to travel the country, checking out different arenas, ballparks, and stadiums. If you're looking to move to Arizona or know someone who is, please reach out to our friend and loyal Bruin, Jay Toia, at 602-487-3975. Once again, 602-487-3975. Madman, you were on a plane to Kansas City, Missouri. I hit you with the text. I go, hey, it's kind of weird. Toia's not at practice. We're like, yeah, it's a little weird. I don't know what's going on with that. And then 20 minutes later, it kind of spiraled out of control to the point where Jay Toia has entered the transfer portal. He tweeted out himself he's graduating from UCLA, and he's going to be entering his name into that area and be looking for a new school, new place to call home when it comes to playing college football. What was your first reaction when it came to Toia leaving the transfer portal, and how devastated should Bruins fans be? Because this guy, you're talking about a one-of-one player on defense right now at the defensive tackle position. This was really our only option on the D-line after losing Latu and the Murphy twins. Talk to me, madman. What are you thinking about Toia departing from Westwood?
Yeah, well, you said it best there. It was a wave of emotions. I think the initial one obviously was shock. My jaw hit the floor. And then, upon time to reflect, this is the new reality of college football where nobody is safe, no matter how safe you believe they are. It just, free agency is always upon us. We always have to be worried about roster construction. We always have to be worried about retention. We always have to be worried about a bigger bag somewhere else. And it's an unfortunate reality of today's college football. But Will, the reason I was so stunned and the reason it was such a visceral reaction is arguably and perhaps inarguably, Jay Toia is the most irreplaceable player on this UCLA Bruins roster, any position included. Even if you talk about an Ethan Garbers, who's the starting quarterback, there's some guys with Martin and Duncan in the wings. There's depth at running back with Harden and Jones. There's a quartet of receivers that are very talented. You've got folks at the tight end position. You've got folks in the secondary. There's work to be done on the offensive line, but there's some bodies there. Toia, in terms of interior defensive line and being able to anchor that front four, anchor that line of scrimmage, and be able to command a double team, there just is nobody else. And when you factor in what you mentioned earlier, Will, needing to replace Latu and the Murphy twins and Carl Jones Jr., and also some of the talent on the back end with the likes of Kamari Ramsey, we were really looking at Toia this year as stepping into that anchor role. You always gave that analogy of Duke Clemens being that one stabilizing anchor in years past on the offensive line. This could be a year where Toia was that anchor and stabilizing force on the defensive line. We talked about how in the years past, we had the likes of a Blaylock leading the back end of that secondary from a captainship perspective. And then last year with Moasau leading the linebacking crew in that front seven from a captain perspective. We were really looking at Toia this year as not only being the only guy that could truly command a double team and allow some of these younger players on the edge to be able to fortify, but also looking at him from a leadership role of being able to set the tone both culturally as well as tactically on the defensive side. So Will cannot overstate how massive a loss this is. And now plan A, B, and C for head coach Deshaun Foster over the next 13 days with the transfer portal window open has to be, can you get some supplements here? I don't know if one guy alone can replace a Toia, but you got to do it by committee, because right now, Will, going into the Big Ten, we've talked about it so much. This is a conference of trench play, both on the offensive line as well as on the defensive line. And Toia was really that anchor on this defensive line. Without him, this is now an average to a below average defensive line, which is a very daunting proposition once you go into Big Ten play. So cannot overstate. I think if you had told me, Will, if we were playing a game or, hanging out at a bar, a drinking game, or just sort of a fun recreational game, Madman, who's the one guy UCLA couldn't lose? My answer would be Toia on this team. And now that really dangerous reality is upon us.
Yeah. And I mean, he, in just so many ways, he was the lone building block off that defensive line. And I know Keanu Williams has potential. I know Gary Smith is a veteran. Those guys cannot do half the things Toia can do. And I mean, we did our most important players of spring ball just a week ago. And outside the quarterback position, which may not be the most important position, just not only in football, but in sports alike, we had Toia second on that list, only to Ethan Garbers. And boy, was he having a good spring too. He was bulldozing his way and blowing up plays left and right on that practice field, man. It was a scene to watch Toia. And you and I think we've always been really good at spotting potential pros before they become into their element. Like, even with Charbonnet, we're like, oh, this guy's going to be like the best running back in the country. Panned out that way. I got killed last year for saying this could be the best defensive line UCLA's ever had. Turned out in a lot of ways and a lot of metrics, that was the case. We've talked about Sturdivant and some of these other guys that we've seen and predicted to be good players. John Gaines and Neo Mafi, things like this. Toia was the next in line to be that at UCLA, to have that future career on the NFL level. And boy, I mean, I had him as my breakout player last year. Defensive tackles and nose tackles really don't get the credit in the stat sheets unless if you're like a freak of nature like Aaron Donald, because your job is to clog the lanes and make sure that you can get your linebackers and edge rushers into position where they need to be. And he did that as well as maybe anybody within the Pac-12 last year. If you look at the production this defensive line put up in terms of pressures and sacks as a whole. So Toia is just such a massive, massive loss on so many different fronts. But looking at what his NIL evaluation will likely be when he hits the market, money has unfortunately always ruled the world. Whether we put it on the table or off the table, it's always ruled college football in a lot of ways. We've heard the stories of Eric Dickerson getting a Corvette, when he was trying to go do his things. Reggie Bush across town getting a house for his family. Maybe it wasn't on the table, but we knew some of these guys were getting paid and getting paid handsomely to do it. Toia, in a lot of ways, I was probably looking up just a comparable NIL evaluation for what he's going to get when he hits the portal. Probably 300, 400K, if I'm being honest. And if you look at the average American salary, what is it, like 70, 75,000 nowadays? That is unbelievable for a kid in that situation. He's going to be able to set himself up. Maybe if he goes to a different state, he can buy himself a house and build himself a future if the NFL doesn't work out for him. So I totally cannot blame him from the financial side of things. I think the unfortunate thing for me is just NIL. I'm happy for the players that get it, but it can also hurt your team as well and the teams you root for. Is that a fair sentiment to say with the NIL and the world we live in now in college football, Madman?
Will, I think you said it best, and it's really an incredible era here in terms of player empowerment, player agency, the opportunity for players to get a piece of the pie when they haven't had that for so long, and they've played such an instrumental role in football programs and athletic departments and in universities being able to really grow from a top line as well as from a bottom line perspective. So the fact that the folks that are creating that reality finally have an opportunity to get their hands in the pie, I think is terrific. But without some form of regulation, without some form of sort of cohesive strategy, this is absolutely the Wild West here, Will. And you said it best. I mean, the 300 to 400K evaluation for a defensive lineman, that is a huge sum of money. And that's the world that we're living in right now. For as great a program and institution as UCLA is, think about this from a Toia perspective. This guy gets the best of all worlds now. He graduates with a degree from UCLA, one of the most reputable universities in the world, has access to that alumni base moving forward in his life. Now he goes as a graduate transfer and has the opportunity to make a considerable amount of six figures for 1 year of service that then sets him up potentially for an NFL payday. And when you look around the country, Will, recent article came out how much Ohio State has paid its players this year, just in the offseason, $34 million worth of nil. In terms of both from a 4-year perspective as well as from a transfer portal perspective, Will, we were initially estimating, hey, for a competitive top 20, top 15 type of program, you probably need somewhere in that $15 million a year range. That number looks like it's getting blown completely out of the water. And now you're looking at 40 or 50 million a year to be in that top 10. So this is the world we live in. Do I think it's sustainable? I do not. But until the minds get together and put some sort of a strategy in place, this is the world we live in. And unfortunately, UCLA is on the short end of the stick in the case of Toia.
Yeah, it's a bummer on a lot of different fronts. And just like the amount of, scholarships you can give out, we got to have some sort of salary cap, make it equitable for all playing fields, because at the end of the day, I think maybe Power 5 schools might have a little bit more NIL money to throw around than some of your non-Power 5 schools. But at the end of the day, coaching and development should rule out for these guys, if the money is the same. And that's kind of where I want it to be, because if you're taking $400, $500, $600 to go to like Boise State, like Malachi Nelson did, to me, that's just kind of copping out of the moment, if I'm being frankly honest. You were a 5-star recruit. You could have done anything. You were USC's next handpicked, chosen successor to Caleb Williams, and you kind of ducked out to Boise State. Situations like that, I don't mean to just crap on Malachi Nelson, but that's just kind of the world we're living in now, where money is just ruling everything and there's no cap and everything going that type of way. It's just frustrating as a fan to kind of see that. So until they cap that, I think we have a real problem in college football.
And Will, just to that point, I mean, this is sort of the challenge, right? One of the reasons why the NFL is so popular. Think about that. One of the reasons why the NBA has gone to a play-in tournament. It's the opportunity to kind of get more teams feeling like they're competitive for a longer period of time. That's kind of the key to popularity in sports today, right? In the NFL, you can go from a Super Bowl team to missing the playoffs and vice versa in a matter of a year. There's so much parity. There's so much opportunity to be able to improve your team year over year that every fan base feels like they're in it. Same thing now with the NBA, kind of the expansion of the playoffs. You're getting every fan base an opportunity to feel like they're in it until the very end. What do both of those sports also have in common? Oh, by the way, they both have a cap. Granted, there's luxury taxes in each of those sports, but they're both capped. So you're creating some equity. Where baseball has kind of gone off the rails and why it's also struggling in popularity is you've got the small market teams essentially just being feeders to the big market teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Red Sox and so forth. And let's hope we don't get to a world in college football where that now becomes the case, where you could talk about group of 5, Power 5, but even if you take it one step further, does every team become a feeder to sort of these top 10 blue blood schools? And you could be really good for 1 year or have a really good player for 1 year, but then ultimately they're going to jump to go to a place where they're going to get paid more. That's going to be really unfortunate. And if we end up in a world, Will, like in Sunday Night Football, players are announcing where they go to school, can you even get that done in one segment? Because players are going to list out 5 schools. I mean, is that even possible to do anymore? So there's some existential things at play here that we really need to look at ourselves in the mirror as sort of a collective college football ecosystem and say, hey, is this the right thing to do moving forward? Is this sport going to be sustainable over the next 3, 5, 7 years.
Yeah. And, I do want to say we wish Jay Toia all the best of luck
Absolutely.
wherever he goes. As a parent, you want your kid to be successful wherever they go. If my future son came to me and said, hey, I got like a $300,000, $400,000 offer to go elsewhere, who am I to tell him he can't do that? It's his life. It's his choice. He can make whatever decisions he wants. And like you said, he graduated from UCLA, so he's got the degree in hand. He's just looking to kind of cash out at this point. Jay Toia, we're bummed about it, buddy, but we understand. Congratulations. You're about to get paid, and you just got a degree from UCLA. You're winning at life, dude. It's great to see that. On the front of who can potentially come in to replace him, the transfer portal has been a big talking point for a lot of UCLA fans. We feel like we got a little bit more NIL money, maybe not the most to keep, a guy like Jay Toia on campus for UCLA, but some of these other guys, I think we got more of a shot on because we got a new, young, hungry head coach in Deshaun Foster and a little bit more money to throw around. Who are some of the defensive tackles you're leaning towards that could maybe come in and, maybe not replace him solely, but maybe patch together a group that can be, sufficient on the football field on the D-line?
Well, I think there's a handful of names out there. And so I think this is where the focus now with head coach Deshaun Foster needs to go. There's a couple of guys, I think, at the top of that list that really warrant some interaction to start with. The first is Jermaine Lowell, who is 6'2", 270, a senior transfer from Louisville, and 31 career games, double-digit career sacks, double-digit tackles for loss. But what's very significant about Lowell is he's a Long Beach Poly kid, and there could be an opportunity to kind of come back home and play in front of friends and family and really sort of bookend his college career in a very significant way. I think the one question mark with somebody like Lowell is durability, but he's shown when he's been on the field just a tremendous amount of production. Another guy, Will, that comes to mind is Dominic Williams, who's big kid, 6'1", 317, upperclassman, TCU, really made a big impact on some of these TCU teams the last couple of years, was really a very nice piece on that team that went all the way to the national championship game against Georgia. And another kid who's a local kid, Mission Hills, California. Stanley Taufalo, who sort of transferred out from USC just a couple days ago. There's an opportunity to maybe stay at home and be able to have a great deal of production. He was a huge piece for SC. Simeon Barrow, a kid who's out of Michigan State, familiarity with the Big Ten, understanding line of scrimmage play. So I think there's 4 or 5 guys, Will, in this transfer portal that you want to be able to target. And there may be an opportunity given proximity to where they played in high school, given the Big Ten alignment, given sort of the values and everything that UCLA brings to the table. I think there's an opportunity here, but now defensive line has to become priorities 1, 2, and 3 in this transfer portal, followed by offensive line. I think that's, if you're going to sort of coordinate your resources really have to be, I need to go get 2 D linemen and I need to go get 2 O linemen as really where my focus needs to be if I'm head coach Deshaun Foster.
Could not agree more. I mean, we've talked about it at length. The Big Ten is a trenches conference through and through. If you are weak on either side of those lines, which right now, guys, it's not looking great on either side, if I'm being frankly honest, it's going to be a rough season. Like, I had our ceiling at like 7-8 wins. Toia just leaving on his own is like 1 to 2 wins in the negative direction for me personally with Toia on his way out. But you brought up some great names. Lowell, he went to Louisville. He was actually at Arizona State too. So you're talking about these Sunday Night Football guys. New era of college football. This would be his 3rd team, wherever he ends up at. Very productive player at Louisville. A very good defense while he was there. So I do like that, Southern California kid. Simone Barrow, I like a lot. The thing with Barrow and Lowell is kind of like you're really getting a 1-year rental out of these kids. Then you're going to have to kind of hit the reboot button. But if I'm going to go with the highest ceiling, I like Williams from TCU, man, because this guy has played in big games. He was in the national championship just over a year ago, playing for the Horned Frogs against Georgia. This guy is not shy for the big moment. He's been very productive. He was an all Big 12 honorable mention. Williams, to me, is the name. Like, if we got him, I'd be very, very happy with that pickup. So let's hope UCLA can kind of continue on that front moving forward. It's just a new world in college football, man. We got to kind of adjust and adapt as people that cover UCLA. Jay Toia, like we said earlier, man, we wish you nothing but the best. Any parting thoughts before we get out of here, man?
Yeah, Will, I think this is an opportunity for some resilience. I think this is kind of a key moment here, the first key moment in the Deshaun Foster era, right, Will? Because up until this point, it's been sort of the honeymoon, right? The hire and how celebrated that was and how emotional the press conference was and the Martin Jarman introduction to Deshaun Foster to the team. Deshaun Foster coming to Pauley, ringing the victory bell, getting everyone excited, moving the spring game back to the Rose Bowl, moving the student section, being so engaging. I got a call, Will, earlier this week as an alum, a recording from Deshaun Foster about renewing season tickets and getting more involved. So he's done so many wonderful things in terms of engagement, getting the men at Westwood more involved, upping those numbers. This is now that first moment of initial adversity for Deshaun Foster. So it's going to be great to see how he handles it, how he attacks the portal. We mentioned some great names. Another one I'll leave with, Will, is Eddie Kelly, defensive tackle from Georgia Tech. Given the KJ Wallace connection, there could be something there as well. So this is going to be great to see how Deshaun Foster grows, responds in this role. I think he's going to pass with flying colors. I think we're going to get some multiple guys on the defensive line and the offensive line. We're going to rally, and I think we're going to see some fresh, hungry faces a week from Saturday in this spring game.
It's your move, Bruins. We got to attack the transfer portal. We're going to have all those news coming up for you. LA Football Show on ESPN Radio. UCLA segment out. We'll be back after the radio.